The Star warns of Easter travel chaos on the roads, with hundreds of miles of railway lines closed for engineering works, which brings me perfectly to introduce our wonderful paper reviewer this morning. It's Rita Clifton. She is no stranger to this programme. She is chair of BrandCap. She's a marketing expert. She has a portfolio of non-exec directorships, including Bupa, Nationwide, ASOS, and Populist, of course, the opinion pollster and reputation research consultancy. Rita, you were glued to the TV last night. You're looking at the papers. What have you found?
Well, glued indeed, I was. I think what's really interesting about the papers is that I guess the more, centre or left-leaning ones are talking more about the seven-way thing, the Magnificent Seven, Technicolor vote, Rainbow vote and everything else. The more right-wing papers are really featuring Ed Miliband flopping. And what's really interesting, so on the Sun front cover, for example, not only have you got the schoolboy masturbate, so hashtag masturbate verdict, ha ha ha, exactly. But on the inside, the ultimate insult is Millie's never necked a pint. So not only did he lose the debate as far as the Sun's concerned, but also he can't do those normal things as well. So it's been really interesting coverage. But I think what's particularly interesting actually is how different the chemistry was in that debate last night. Firstly, versus last week, for example, where it's sort of, two guys tussling. Last night, despite the fact you had 7 people with very, very different views, I thought it was conducted really well. There were moments, there were flashpoints and everything else, but I think Julia Etchingham did do a great job. You mentioned her earlier.
Yeah.
So not only did we have, I think, a very good and well-balanced debate as far as the politicians is concerned, but she did a great job at bringing people in at the right time, controlling the debate. I thought it was a really, really extraordinary event.
And having 3 women on the platform, very unusual to have almost half of politicians, frontline politicians being women. Do you think that made a difference? It kept it less shouty and less confrontational?
I think it did, and I think that the real surprise here, and it's come up in all the polls and all the papers and everything else, is the winner here being Nicola Sturgeon. Because I think a lot of people expected her to feel a little bit shouty, maybe, a bit unreasonable, but she came across as being sensible, appealing, a bit like a quite fun aunt, She really did come across very well. And when you look at how the newspapers are rating people, so she comes first in all of them, irrespective of where the newspapers sit, she comes first in all of them. Nigel Farage, of course, comes second, as you would imagine. David Cameron third, Ed Miliband fourth, and so on. But I definitely think this was a breakthrough moment on television. Whether or not you think it's going to be a multicoloured result, or whether or not you think it's going to be a Frankenstein government, because that's the other angle that's come out on the papers about what things could be like. Is this a vision of the future? So maybe not a Magnificent Seven, but definitely a moment in time, I reckon.
That's Rita Clifton. She's reviewing the paper. She'll be back with more. Back to Rita Clifton with the papers. What else are you seeing in the papers, Rita?
I'm just going to, just on that election debate, I was just thinking on David Cameron. In many ways, David Cameron lived up to his brand, which is he wants to act prime ministerial. I think what was really important for him last night, he didn't lose. And he didn't lose that debate last night. Because, when you're winning, you need to lie down and win. And I think that's a bit, as we were saying last night. I think the other thing, just to say, is having that balance on the panel. Nicola Sturgeon talked about breaking the old boys network, and we definitely saw that last night. Whether or not Leanne Wood looked, I'm not sure about the comment about the usherette. There was a lot of tweeting last night about how she looked, and I'm not sure that's particularly edifying. A lot of men were rather admiring of the way she looked. I think that's true, but again, it was a different conversation, a different feel to the conversation. Just talking about difference, then going back to the paper now for something completely different. David Bowie has surprised us all again. This is a man who has been full of surprises all the way through his career, and is nothing sacred. The Man Who Fell to Earth is going to be turned into a musical.
Really?
Absolutely.
With his cooperation?
Yes, in fact, he's going to be an integral part of this. So he's working on a staged musical version of the same sci-fi horror story. This guy is 68.
Amazing, isn't
and
it?
still has this extraordinary capacity to reinvent himself, reinvent what he's done. Performances of the production are going to be beginning this winter. I mean, really, over the years, all the things that have been turned into musicals, including religion, and actually this film was a bit sort of quasi-religious for a lot of people at the time. So you've got to hand it to him, haven't you? He was the original, reinventing your own personal brand, doing it over a period of time before Madonna was ever there. So I think that was quite an interesting perspective.
That's Rita Clifton. That's David Bowie, the musical, coming up. I'm Andrew Pearce. I'm in for Nick Ferrari. It's Good Friday. It's LBC breakfast. The time is now 7:31. Back to the papers with Rita Clifton, leading businesswoman Rita Clifton. It is a tough job being a politician.
I mean, who would really want to do it?
I've been writing
I'm very
about
glad
them.
that some people do, and some of them are even quite sensible.
I know. I've been writing about them since I joined the Times in 1988, and I have to say, as the years gone, I think good on you. I'm glad there are people who want to do it, because I wouldn't.
I know. But, people talk about acting, and there was definitely a lot of acting and acting up last night. But there are also real great glimpses of normal-looking people talking about issues that... the person who did that best of all, as people have said, is Nicola Sturgeon. So I thought it was really interesting, and it would be great if people really, the general public really looked at detailed policies and really thought it through and everything else. But frankly, that's not how human beings work. They absolutely work on the basis of, is that my kind of person?
Yeah.
Do I trust them? Whatever. They act more on emotion than they do on reason, whatever they say. So that's what's going to happen. People are going to look at all the options and think, who do I trust? And the economy will be really, really important.
A few weeks ago, in that very chair where you're sitting, Natalie Bennett, the Green Party leader, had what she now describes as her brain fade when she was talking to Nick Ferrari, our very own Nick Ferrari. Yeah. One of the biggest car crash interviews I've ever heard. I was listening to it at home and texted Nick, was going and saying, do you realise what's happening here? Of course he did. It was a brilliant interview. Do you think she did better last night? She's last in most of the polls.
Yeah, I think she did better last night, certainly than happened on this programme. And there is something slightly endearing about her. You talk about brain fade. What was very interesting there is that actually a lot of people felt quite sympathetic. We've all had brain fades from time to time, and the way that she came out and admitted it. I mean, clearly that's not going to stand her in very good stead when people think, do I really rate this person? Are they going to deliver, to my interests and my agenda? And are they going to be influential in Westminster? All those questions will come to mind. So that's not what's coming through in the polls, and I doubt very much whether it will come through, in reality. On the other hand, it's certainly adding to the debate. It's certainly added to it last night. I did feel a bit sorry for her, and all the ratings would say that unfortunately she came bottom of the class.
Did. Back in the papers, Rita, what have you spotted?
Well, what doesn't come bottom of the class is Waitrose.
Oh, I love Waitrose.
Oh, well, lots of people do. And what's more, lots of people do because this is in the Daily Mail, the £38,000 Waitrose effect. So house values are 12% higher with a store nearby, but surprise, surprise, lower with a little.
Right.
Now, what's interesting here, of course, is the cause and effect. Is it that actually, more expensive areas have Waitroses, or is it that actually these are average areas, but when they get a Waitrose, it goes up? I mean, it's difficult to distinguish this. On the other hand, what's really interesting is having a Waitrose within a walking distance is not only convenient, it also means that your house is worth more. And the next one down is Sainsbury's, and even Tesco comes in with a price premium of 8% versus the average, followed by Marks and Spencer.
You see, I'm blessed because there's a massive Waitrose near me, there's a massive Sainsbury's, which I don't use very often, there's one of those Marks and Spencer shopping supermarket food shops.
Oh, yeah.
And but there's no Lidl or Aldi, and there's a Tesco, one of those Tesco locals up the road too, so I'm blessed. But it says Waitrose is really expensive. Now, if you go shopping in Waitrose, quite often on certain items it says same price as Tesco. They are alive to the fact they've got to be competitive in prices.
Absolutely, and they've neutralised that effect. The other thing we should say about Aldi and Lidl, frankly, whatever this house price stuff says, Aldi and Lidl have disrupted the grocery retail sector in a really, really dramatic way, and what's more, across the social spectrum too. So, you might have a Waitrose effect. That's bloody good on asset values, but actually, when you look at where the money is going, or the share at least of that supermarket sector is going, then Aldi and Lidl.
You have to always welcome competition, and a great mate of mine always buys his wine in Lidl.
Yeah. Absolutely, and the way that they've marketed themselves has been really smart. It's surprising what you can get from there. I don't know if you remember all their TV commercials. You have people coming to join parties and things like that. And of course, it's revealed that this stuff comes from Aldi or Lidl. I mean, it is a really, really good marketing campaign that they've done, but nevertheless, Waitrose, I don't know whether you followed a bit of Waitrose marketing activity last year that was asking people about reasons to shop at Waitrose. Why do you like Waitrose? Fantastically funny string of responses. I like, Waitrose. What do you mean? I don't shop. My servants do that for me. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful
And I don't shop at Waitrose because that idiotic woman, Pippa Middleton, writes in the Waitrose magazine, because she does nothing for me. That's Rita Clifton, leading businesswoman. I'm Andrew Pearce. I'm in for Nick Ferrari. You're listening to LBC Breakfast Show. It's Good Friday. Time is 7:46. Back to the papers with Rita Clifton. Rita.
Well, just on the international picture, Greece. What's really interesting...
Teetering on the edge again, isn't it?
Brinkmanship is us. I mean, what's so interesting, they may be forced to take the unprecedented step of missing a payment to the International Monetary Fund next week, and this will be the first time any developed country has ever defaulted. Again, these are dramatic moments. There are so many dramatic moments, I know, happening in the world. But, what's really interesting, I think, about Greece is the debate about, is this, IMF, or is it, are we going to default to the IMF, or are we going to default to our own people? As far as the Syriza government is concerned, it's a no-brainer. And they might be preparing to renationalise the banks. Again, dramatic moments in Europe, dramatic moments in Greece. And I have to say, I mean, what a fascinating thing. Leather jacket leadership going on in Greece. And indeed, if you look at what's happening in Spain, there's at least a chance that someone who has got a ponytail and
the anti-establishment party.
Absolutely. And, again, come back to the debate last night. Things are happening. Seismic things are happening in politics. Seismic things are happening in Europe, and seismic things are happening, I know, on a broader scale. So fascinating to see what's going to happen in Greece. Who's going to blink first is always going to be the issue here.
I've had a hunch, and I've had it for a very long time, that Greece will inevitably be forced out of the euro because it should never have gone in the first place. It's too small. They cooked the books, and the euro will be able to withstand the shock of Greece leaving.
Well, I think that's true, and also it'll have all sorts of advantages for Greece after the first chaotic period. At least they can then, devalue their currency. They can do lots of stuff with tourism. That is one of their key industries, much more even than they're doing at the moment.
And that will make my holiday to Greece much cheaper.
And that'll be great for all of us, because I'm right with you on that one.
Exactly. That's Rita Clifton, who's been reviewing the papers.